Boom. Start. Even grow. Saw the crowd. Wonderful news. Wonderful news. Wonderful news. Wonderful news for people who hunger and thirst for God's justice. They're going to be satisfied. Wonderful news for the merciful. You will receive mercy for yourself. Wonderful news for the pure in heart. You will see God. Wonderful news for the peacemakers. You'll be called God's children. Wonderful news for people who are persecuted because of God's way. The kingdom of heaven belongs to you. Wonderful news for you when people slander you and persecute you and say all kinds of wicked things about you falsely because of me. Celebrate and rejoice. There's a great reward for you in heaven. That's how they persecuted the prophets who went before you. It sounded a little different. We're going to get to that because we have been talking about the Jewish brethren's expectation not being what they got with the Messiah. Talk about the world view being turned upside down, how Christ's preaching was not what they wanted to hear, but it was what they needed to hear, and just the opposite. There was a movie not, I don't know, about Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. The premise of the movie was trying to break the 730 mile an hour barrier to break the sound barrier. But every time they got close, the planes would come apart, or they'd shake to pieces, or the instrumentation wouldn't work right, or all of these tries, these planes, when they got right up to that point, would just come apart. And so, in the movie, it's not really what happened, but in the movie, Chuck Yeager figures out that the controls of his aircraft react oppositely at that speed. And so, I don't know if anybody knows anything about airplane, but pull back, you go up, push forward, you go down. That's the basics. That's just the basics, the cliff notes of what's going on. And so he realized or figured out that if he pushed forward, the plane would go up, it would maintain its stability, it didn't come apart, and he was able to break the sound barrier, break that 730 mile an hour barrier. So this is just an illustration of what's going on with this Beatitudes, that we call it, this sermon. It's completely opposite to get to their goal. They've gotten to this point in their history. They've gotten to this point in their life. They've gotten to this point as God's children. And now things are not going to work how they're supposed to work. It's not going to work in the way that's intuitive from what they've been taught. It's not going to work in the way that they've always looked forward to it working. And we talked about what they considered the Messiah to be, and the new king, and a warrior king, and kicking out the Romans, and all those kinds of things. But it's not going to be that. It's going to be the opposite. And the way that's going to be established and the way that's going to work, the controls are going to go different than what you're not intuitive. I wish Brandon Rice was here, because I think it was him. We were watching a video, and it kind of illustrated how difficult this really is. But somebody had made a bicycle that if you turn one way, it goes the other way. If you turn this way, it goes the other way. So video was about being so difficult to ride a bike. Okay? Because most people in this room at one point in their life ridden a bike, and so you get on the bike and this goes this way and this goes this way. It's intuitive once you learn how to ride. But once you get on a bike, that when you go this way, it goes this way, it no longer matches what even your balance. It doesn't match what your mind and your balance, your muscle memory, it doesn't match. And so it's a difficult thing to force your mind into, okay? And that's kind of what we're looking at here. This is a difficult thing for the Jewish people to force their minds into. It's familiar to us, but it was a difficult thing. So this is how Christ is taking God's people past that 735 miles an hour, basically, past that sound barrier, and being counterintuitive, and probably, if you thought about it enough, it's probably in that group of people a sonic boom. You know, because when you break the sound barrier, you get this loud noise, and it would have to be a loud noise going on as an example of the effect that Christ is having on his contemporaries and the people that he's talking to, and his disciples, and those people that he's surrounded himself with as he's called his apostles to him. And so the world, as a general rule, recognizes Jesus as a great teacher, and they kind of leave it at that. Maybe possibly a prophet, but a great teacher. But that's not exactly accurate. Obviously, yes, he's a great teacher, but it doesn't end there. This is, of course, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and this is how Matthew presents it. But people often say that it's a wonderful teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, and that if only people would obey it, the world would be a better place. Okay? I can see that. I think we can all recognize that if we would just adhere to those particular attributes, Beatitudes, the world would obviously be a better place. Okay? Now, this author's take, and this is where it's going to get weird, if you think that Jesus was just simply sitting there telling people how to behave properly, and obviously that is part of what's going on, but this blessings, these wonderful news that he's announcing, are not saying try hard and live like this. This author's perspective is that he's talking to people that are already like that. Okay? So let's shift gears in our mind, and that are already in good shape, they should be happy and celebrate. Okay? Jesus is not suggesting that these are simply timeless truths about the way the world is and about human behavior. It is, and actually at this time it's the opposite of human behavior. But we also understand that those that mourn often go uncomforted. That's just part of the world that we live in. The meek don't always, the meek, as far as inheriting the earth, those who long for justice frequently take the longing to the grave. We can see that from a human perspective, lack of spiritual vision, but in this world that they were living in at the time, Christ talks about it. This is an upside down world view. Okay? All of these teachings are contrary, not all of them, but they're contrary to popular concept of what that would be. They're contrary to what they've been taught. They're contrary to a lot of times human nature. A lot of the things that Christ talks about are things that we need to work on because it doesn't come easy. Things that we need to strive for because it's not human nature. Things that we need to focus on and meditate on and realize when we're not acting in a particular way that we need to be acting in a particular way. So it's not easy. And so in this upside down world, or right way up world, whatever, that Jesus is saying that with his work, these things are starting to come true. And we talked about the beginning of his ministry. And these are the things that those around can see are going to start happening. So the author brings this forward as an announcement. This is an announcement, not a philosophical analysis of the world. It's about something that's starting to happen. And it's not just a general truth or a general way of life that we should ascribe to, which it is, but this is an announcement that the gospel, this is the just shouting, proclaiming the good news, proclaiming the truth. It's proclaiming the gospel. So when Jesus called his disciples, we talked about it last week, follow me. That was what he said, follow me. And so because God is doing a new thing, this list of wonderful things, or the gospel, or the blessings, part of the invitation, part of his summons, part of his call it a hook, part of his hook. You got advertisements that hook you in, and this is all part of the hook. The way of saying that God is at work in a fresh way, new way, but still God at work. But this is what it looks like. You don't get to decide what God's work looks like. Your preconceived notions are irrelevant when it comes to God's working with his people, in his people, on the earth, in this new way. I used to tell my boys all the time, you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. And humankind, especially at this time, may not have liked it, may not have liked the answer they were getting to the questions they had been asking for 1,000 years. They may not have liked the way that Jesus called them to be humble, and peacemakers, and meek, and mourning, all of those things. They didn't have to like it. We don't have to like it. We just have to do it. And as a dad selling that to my kids, I can see the outcome. I can see that by doing that, you're going to learn this, and because I've lived that, and I can see the end. What the end is, I can see what the end is supposed to look like. Now I'm looking at the end. It's close. It's close to what it's supposed to look like. Brian, go ahead. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. He's talking about, he's talking about what's going on here. He's also talking about the reward that you'll see at the end, being with God. He's talking about all of those things. And so, but it's a different way. And this is what it looks like. And so this is the beginning of a new era for God's people. Okay? Not only a new era for God's people, a new people. Okay? It's the beginning of the era of a new people. He's talking to the Jewish people. They know who they are. They know they are God's chosen. Now they have, and we're going to talk about that in later chapters, but or later verses, but they've moved away from what they were supposed to be, and now this is where we are. So now all the things that the audience that he's talked to, all the things that these people thought that was in control, that they had control of, that they knew about, and how the other things were going to work, how things were, in their mind, how the things were going to play out, is different. He's turned that all upside down, because the people he's talking to still think that this wonderful news, this blessing, consists of success and wealth and long life and victory in battle and power over the other nations, and that's still their mindset. That's still what they expect. That's still what they hear. It's still what they hear when he's talking, because their concept of what reality is going to look like is skewed, and so obviously they're looking from that perspective of what he's got to say, and so Jesus is offering the news, this wonderful news for the humble and the poor and the mourners and the peacemakers. So the blessings or the wonderful news or the beatitude. God is bringing forth his wonderful news. He's bringing forth his blessing. It's God's blessing on people. It's not what they expected. It's not what they wanted. It's not what they looked forward to or how they saw it ending. But it's God's wonderful news. We don't get to change that. We get to accept that. We get to live that. And so, what you should do. That's exactly right. And so, God is acting in and through Jesus, obviously to turn the world upside down, turn Israel upside down, to pour these lavish blessings on those who turn to him and accept the new thing that he's doing. But the point is not to offer a list of what sort of people God normally blesses. It's not. And we went through that list a little bit ago, but who the world sees as blessed. Okay. It's actually to announce this new covenant that God is forming with his people. And the example of that is in Deuteronomy, the people came through the wilderness and arrived at the border of the promised land, and God gave them a solemn covenant. He listed the blessings and the curses that would come upon them if they were obedient or disobedient. That's in Deuteronomy 28. Now Matthew, showing us Jesus coming out of Egypt, coming through the water in the wilderness, and into the land of promise. Now here is the new covenant. So, when did these promises come true? And there's a great temptation for us to answer in heaven after death. The kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit, persecuted. There's a great reward in heaven for those who suffer persecution for Jesus' sake. But if we consider our concept of heaven, when I say heaven, I would venture to say that we have a picture of a place in our mind. Okay. And I kind of equate that to, and obviously heaven is a place. But I would equate that to the church. Okay. The world sees this building as the church. We see ourselves as the church, regardless of where we are. We are the church. Okay. So, if you look at heaven as the place where God is, and we are with God, God is with us, then you can venture to say that depending on your definition of heaven, anytime we're in the presence of God, we're in heaven. That just washes itself out. But and that's a difficult thing, because when I think heaven, I think pearly gates and streets of gold and in God's presence and those kind of things. Okay, and the scriptures tell us that's right. You know, that is part of heaven, God's dwelling. But if God's Spirit dwells within us, and we're the temple and God's presence is there, then that would suggest that we get to be not in a place, but we get to be connected to, I guess that's the word I'm looking for. We get to experience some part of heaven in us. I know that's difficult. It's hard to say. But if we look at it from that perspective, that heaven is God's space. Heaven is where God is. When we're joined together with God in the end, our perspective changes. So when we talk about Jesus' prayer, to pray that God's kingdom will come, God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The life in the realm of where God is already king is life becoming the world. So God has always intended for his people to be with him. We can learn that from the scripture. To have a relationship with him and spend eternity with him in the end. That's God's plan. We see that through the scripture. So this Beatitude, this section of Beatitudes, those that follow Jesus are commanded, they're told, they're through the influence of the Spirit, through the influence of others, they're to follow Jesus and live by these rules. Now, we should be peacemakers. We should be humble. We should be meek. That's the point. There are summons to live in the present day, in a way that it will make sense in God's promised future. This is the life we'll lead in the presence of God. And so, because that future is present in Jesus, it's in the process of arriving through Jesus' life, the Jewish nation at this time and us at this time, we're being called to believe in those attributes, to believe that that is the right way, to believe that that's God's way, and to believe that the reward that we seek is not through war and hate and power and money and influence and prestige. We're to look for our reward in humility and in peace and in friendship with our enemies and all of those things that are just upside down, not only to culture, but they're upside down to what I would call human nature. It just doesn't feel right that is right. And a lot of times, you just have to do it to prove it. You have to convince yourself to push those controls down if you want to go up. And as Christ continues to preach and teach and live his life, you'll see that a lot through his ministry. And you can see through his ministry that there are expectations of the people that are following him. There are expectations just culturally. There are expectations just in the time frame that he's in, of things going way different than they actually go. And obviously we have hindsight. We can see the end result, and we can see that that was the victory, and we can see that that was the only way it was going to go, and it was the right way, and it was God's way, and we can't argue with the result because here we are. And so the word that keeps coming to my mind is counterintuitive, and I don't know why, but it just seems counterintuitive. It's just upside down, and not easy to explain because you have to look from both sides. It's not easy to do. It was never supposed to be easy. It's not easy to accept because of our preconceived notions and how we were raised and how we were taught and the world we live in and all these outside influences and all of those kind of things. And so, and even, if you look to the religious world, the blessings of God look different in their teaching than they look in the scriptures. The religious world will preach God's blessings, but they just look like the world's blessing. Just more of what the world would say is a blessing. We can see that that's not what Christ taught. We can see that that's not what the plan is. And we can see that how we live has a huge effect on us, our family, our community, our church, our workplace, our environment. It just has a huge impact on our environment. So we need to be careful. And that's not always. So, I'm going to go ahead and read Matthew 5:13 through 20. We won't get too much of it, but we're going to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll come back to it next week. Highlight. You're the salt of the earth, but if the salt becomes tasteless, how's it going to get salty again? It's no good for anything. You might as well throw it out and walk all over it. You're the light of the world. A city can't be hidden. It's on top of a hill. People don't light a lamp and put it under a bucket. They put it on a lampstand. It gives light to everybody in the house. That's how you must shine your light in front of people. Then they will see what wonderful things you do, and they'll give glory to your Father in heaven. Don't suppose that I came to destroy the law and prophets. I didn't come to destroy them. I came to fulfill them. I'm telling you the truth. Until heaven and earth disappear, not one stroke, not one dot is going to disappear from the law until it's all come true. So anyone who relaxes a single one of these commandments, even the little ones, and teaches that to others, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who does them, teaches them, will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Let me tell you, unless your covenant behavior is far superior to that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you'll never get in to the kingdom of heaven. So, the Jewish nation at this time had a revolutionary attitude. They were looking for a king to rise up and revolt against the Roman Empire, to revolt against the powers that be, to set the Jewish nation at the top of the pole, and everybody else is their footstool. And that's what they were looking for, this revolutionary conquest of their enemies, other nations, those kind of things. But During a revolution, we've seen through history revolutions come and go in different parts of the world, and we see that there's a lot of passion, a lot of focus, a lot of energy put towards the revolution. And then let's say that they do oust the other government. They oust whoever is in power that they're trying to oust. Now what? Now what? How do they keep the lights on? How do they keep the taxes coming in? How do they keep the roads fixed and the people happy and the food coming in and all of the things that are necessary when you're in charge? How do they do that? And not only how do they do that, how do they do that without becoming just like the people that they kicked out? Just like the government that they revolted against. How does that happen in an orderly manner? I don't know, orderly, but how does that happen? How do you not become corrupt? How does it not, after it starts off in this burst of good intentions and all the things that come with it, how does it not become riddled with corruption and muddle and all of that kind of thing? The revolution that Jesus is teaching, the revolution that Jesus is preaching, that he's leading, that you want to call it a revolution, different sort from all the other ones that are throughout history have gone on. And he had to do two things at the same time. So he had to show the Jews of his day that this revolution, this movement, that he himself was the fulfillment of all that Israel had believed and longed for. They had a skewed attitude of what it was that they longed for. The future that they saw for themselves was not there. Second, he had to show that he and those that followed him were living and dying by this upside down way that he's teaching. So it was a difficult time in history. It was a difficult time for the Jewish nation here. And also, we can call it a difficult time for Christ to come in the midst of all that's going on and proclaim this new way. Proclaim this new, not only new way, but new God's way. Okay? And so, a lot of tension, a lot of misunderstanding. Who is this Jesus? Who is this group? Who is this group of the way? A lot of turmoil going on. And there was already turmoil going on, so this is just adding to the stress and the turmoil and everything that was going on. And Christ is right in the middle of it. Some think of Jesus as just a great Jewish teacher. Without much of a revolution. Others see him as so revolutionary that he left Judaism behind altogether, established something quite new. But Jesus held these two things together in himself, offering something completely revolutionary, in which he would remain faithful. He walked the walk. He was who he said he was. He did what he said he was going to do. He acted in a way that was an example to those around him should act in exactly the same way and never wavered from it. this reality that Christ was here was what was pointed at from the very beginning. Okay? This is the culmination of everything that had happened up until this point with the Jewish nation, with their trust in God, with their governing style, and with the priests and the religious leaders, and where they are and what they're doing, and all of those things. This is the culmination of that, along with the beginning of this. There's a lot going on, and so Israel's whole life and tradition pointed to this one point. Has anybody heard any bells at all? Is it time? Okay. Charles says it's time. It's time. So we'll start in this area next week and try to finish up some more of Matthew 5. Appreciate your attention. Thanks for being here. And don't forget, churchy church.